Hey everybody, I am your host, Brendan. Welcome to another episode of SwingBadder. Today we're going to get into what would be a worst World Series than the one we just witnessed viewership-wise. And before we get going, I wanted to introduce my fellow compadres. Dad, how are you today? How is life?
Above excellent. How's that?
Above excellent is fantastic. I really do enjoy above excellent. Todd, how are you?
Oh man, I'm getting there.
Getting there is good. Getting after it.
I'm rounding second. How about that? I'm rounding second.
That's good. That's a very good theme what we have going. As we're sitting here looking at the numbers from the World Series, which were not that great, although we were pretty happy with Arizona and the Rangers facing each other. It was a fun family affair. Sadly, we don't have a family of millions. We only had a family of a few, so our viewership didn't really do anything. The question that it goes out to you two on the fly, just wondering what your thoughts are. What would be a worst World Series tandem of teams? I have a few in mind that would be pretty bad. We can rank our top three, if you will, from the American League and the National League. We don't need to go on the playoffs this year, although I do think there were a couple teams we could have selected with the Diamondbacks that could have made a worst viewership. As we know that the Yankees draw, Boston draws, Dodgers. We have some massive teams, massive markets. So what markets are you thinking of in the game of baseball that come to mind that if they made the World Series, everyone would go, not interested? Todd, what do you got? What is your team for? Let's look at the National League.
My gut tells me that Tampa.
American League. Okay, you're going American League. Tampa is an easy.
But my real, like the one that would absolutely, the American League team that would tank the ratings would be Seattle.
Yeah,
number one because it's West Coast.
Very. But you would start it. But again, we had West Coast here. It starts the game at 5. That's what they did.
That's great, but it's Seattle, and you're as far geographically. You are as far away from the center of the baseball universe as you could possibly be.
Okay, so from Seattle to the Giants, San Francisco has always drawn.
No, but that's why I'm not picking the Giants for the National League.
Right, you're saying that the difference between Seattle and San Francisco is that massive.
Have you driven that drive? That's like 4 days.
It's a pretty big one. But Seattle.
If you ever played the game Oregon Trail, just when you thought you got there, it was a whole separate part of the game going down the river from the Washington, Oregon to Northern California if you wanted to pick that route.
So your two American League teams that you would say would crash ratings are Seattle Mariners.
Seattle would be the worst. Tampa Bay would be the second worst because Tampa Bay can't even put people in the stands for the playoffs. That's why.
I don't think Tampa is interested in actually going to the playoffs when they have the 2-game playoff or 3-game. They want to get to another level before they show up. Kind of like... tell me when you did something interesting, as your grandparents would say. It's great. You graduated high school. Tell me when you do something interesting with your life. So that's Tampa.
The National League one is just too easy.
All right. Well, hold on the National League. Dad, what are your thoughts on the American League?
Well, American League, I went with Seattle, but I'll change it since Todd did, and I'll give you another team that wouldn't draw very much nationally. It'd be Cleveland.
Cleveland did I believe Cleveland?
It's a regional game, and Cleveland's like between cities. They're between Chicago and New York, and I didn't think so anyways, that's after I picked Seattle first, but then Cleveland. My National League team is different than Todd's.
So let me pause you for a second on the Cleveland and Cleveland Guardians.
I think Cleveland would actually draw because of the movie Major League.
Well, we just had the Cleveland was in the World Series and they lost to the Cubs, if you recall.
Well,
But that's again, was it the numbers were great because the Cubs were in the World Series versus Cleveland. We are picking the two teams that combined would be a travesty for baseball. So you're saying the Cleveland Indians would be a travesty for the
travesty for baseball or a travesty for TV?
The TV ratings. The TV ratings is all we're talking about, which is all baseball cares about because that's where they get their money. That's their juice.
Right. To be clear, my number one in American Seattle, and Cleveland's my second pick.
That is your top two.
Yep.
Dad, now that I'm rounding second, I got to say it's nice to be on the second half of the base pass with you.
So my two American League teams are not very shocking. I have Tampa in this mix. My other one I don't think is very shocking at all just because of the turbulent world they're in. But I don't think Oakland draws at all. if Oakland were to make it, they haven't been good in a long time. When they were good and the ratings, everyone likes the underdog. But again, they were not. If they make it to the World Series with another team, Oakland doesn't carry the same weight as San Francisco. It doesn't carry the same weight as as some other teams. So Oakland's in my mix only because of where they are, where they've been, and where they're trying to be. That's my 2 cents.
I disagree with you on Oakland.
That's fair.
I think there are Oakland fans around the country, and I think there are closeted people who like the green and yellow, and I think that you would get a massive underdog turnout for Oakland.
Well, I'm going to fast forward here. I'm going into the future where Oakland is now the Las Vegas A's, and I also think that hurts their draw because now they're a touristy thing to watch, not the Oakland A's, if you will, with the history and what have you. There's other teams
what are the ratings like the Golden Knights getting and the Raiders? Are they getting ratings or no?
I think the Golden Knights NHL was not a very high watched. There's not a lot of history there. There wasn't a big watch for them. I think I have some honorable mentions, if you will, in the American League. Honorable mentions for me are going to be like I think the Kansas City Royals are kind of honorary. They're Toronto Blue Jays, although interesting, they don't really draw in America as much. Those are teams that if you sprinkle them in with the wrong National League team, you're going to get terrible ratings. So you have Seattle. Dad, you have also Seattle. Todd, you picked Tampa. I picked Tampa. Dad, you picked Cleveland. And Todd, you picked you picked such a Seattle. Good one. No, you're two. You had Seattle and Tampa.
Was sure.
Right. So Todd agrees with both of us, Dad. And moving on to the National League. So again, we've sprinkled on some bad American League ratings. Now we're going to go to the National League ratings. Dad, you're going to start first with what are your 2 or 3 National League teams that sink the World Series ratings?
Miami.
The Miami Marlins. That is a very good pick.
And they're somewhat realistic because they actually made the playoffs.
That's true. They have a good team.
Then you could go with Colorado, who's not good because they didn't smell the playoffs, but no one's watching Colorado either.
I think Colorado gets about as far away from the playoffs as you can get, like a junior high kid trying to date a girl. Just tragically awful all the way around, especially we've all been through that stage in our life. Colorado, and it's so great that these teams are so memorable. Miami Marlins. The outfield in the Miami alone is not television worthy for the World Series. They'd have to do something with that, right?
Miami's disgusting, and they should lose their team.
What are your 2 teams, Todd? Those are good picks.
Miami. I hate Miami, so I just I hate Miami just because the sculpture. Like if they never unveiled the sculpture, I don't know. I don't think anybody cares about Florida baseball. It's weird, but it's really weird, right? I get Miami. I get Colorado. I gotta be honest. I think Arizona is as bad as it gets in the National League. I don't think you're ever going to have ratings in the National League lower than when Arizona's in it. This is why, even in Arizona, and you guys know this, most of the fans that go to Arizona sporting events are fans for other teams because they're people that are imported from other parts of the country. So Arizona themselves, Dad, you're probably one of 15 people who you're a native Diamondbacks fan. When you looked at this World Series, there was that video of the dad, which is a great video, by the way, the dad crying when the Rangers won because he had been a Rangers fan his whole life, because he was a fan of them when they were the Washington Senators. There was history there. You had a team that grew up out of the proverbial desert. And if you had to be a native Arizonian to root for that team, otherwise you're rooting for the Cubs when they came to town. You're rooting for the Mets when they came to town. You're rooting for the Dodgers when they came to town. And there were so many imports that were going. So really, when the Diamondbacks are in the World Series, unless you're playing the Yankees, you're going to get really horrible ratings. So I'm putting that out there. And I think Arizona's as low as it gets, with Miami a close second. I think even Colorado, you'd get people that are watching that just because the novelty of the fact that it's Colorado.
I think you make a very valid point about Arizona because of the imports. I can just tell you, we can go into the playoff games we had to combat with the teams that were visiting. Now, the Dodgers weren't so bad. We had game 3. We were already up 2-0, so that was nice. If we were 1-1, the Dodger fans would have overpowered the stadium. The Philly fans certainly showed up in mass. They took in the entire right side of the stadium. That you could hear their chants. Texas also showed up somewhat. So when you have a World Series and the other team has a contingent, because to your point, when everyone's imported, that's a problem. I would have even argued that back during the COVID World Series, Arizona probably should have hosted it because there are more fans here from different arenas that would have had fun coming instead of Texas.
Have the Arizona Cardinals ever actually played a home game?
Yes, they do.
Ever.
They do, but again, we are an imported people from every other state. And the other thing that is going, again, say again all the time here, October and November baseball is when all of the people who have a retirement home or a second home in Arizona come to stay with us because the temperature's nicer. And oh, wow, we have a World Series. And oh, wow, I'm originally a Texas fan or I'm a Philly fan. I want to go watch my team. And it costs it's a bargain to go to games here in comparison to other places. So
Right.
I think that's pretty common to retirement states. I think the state of Florida, there's more Yankee fans in Florida than there are Marlin or Tampa Bay fans, or Boston fans or Met fans. They all moved at their retirement to Florida, and that's their primary team. Same problem.
Listen, I'm in the Northeast. It's the life goal of everybody up here to make it down to Florida. Hook it up in the villages, get your golf cart hooked up, get that thing souped up for $6,000 or $7,000 and tool around and talk about what a big Yankee, Mets, whatever Boston fan you are. And then just, that's it. That, like, the dream of everybody on Long Island is to get out of Long Island and go down to Florida and root for your team and tell everybody how great lacrosse is. That's what we all want to do.
And from a standpoint of just thinking about Miami and Arizona, the two you picked, if they're in a 3-game playoff where they have home field advantage, like Tampa did, the chances of them utilizing that for all of their fans are very low. Like, let's say the Arizona Diamondbacks host the Phillies. The Phillies are showing up in droves, just like they did in the National League Championship.
Didn't you say it was cheaper for Philly fans to fly to Arizona and go to the playoff game in Arizona than it was for them to actually go to the playoff game in Philadelphia?
Yes, that is correct. Again, you're making the point. So your two teams for the National League, Todd, are very strong. Arizona, Miami. Dad, you're Miami. And I love how I forget Colorado. I love how I forget Colorado because to me, the Colorado, and again, if you wanted to watch earlier episodes, we picked the Anaheim Angels as teams that are so far away from the playoffs that even if God comes down and anoints them, they still don't make it because of all the work they need to do. So we are looking at Colorado as in a similar space. They're nice. They're there. But to your point, Dad, did they really? I mean, they did go to one World Series and they faced Boston. So that, again, tilts the ratings quite a bit. So it's interesting we don't have Texas Rangers in the American League, even though they showed up and they didn't really draw fans for them. So for National League, for me, I agree with both of your picks. If I'm trying to throw a curveball to the Midwest of America, where like the Reds are, or teams that just have not done it, the Brew Crew, for instance, they don't draw the fans because the population's just not there. So I think the National League Central is always a problem. Cardinals are not a problem and the Cubs are not a problem, but I think the Reds have been non-existent for so long. Where is their fan base? Similarly, you have the, I just said the team too. Cincinnati Reds. What was the other team I had there? As my brain.
In Pittsburgh, you had Milwaukee.
Milwaukee, Pittsburgh, and Cincinnati. The problem with those communities is the population decrease in the area doesn't help them. And so what's the draw other than memorabilia or people thinking how great it is? So we haven't had a World Series where it's like Tampa, Arizona. Miami, Tampa may be the worst World Series you could have of all of the teams because, to your point, Todd, no one's a fan. They wanted baseball to go visit Florida and have baseball in the summertime and not be in the Northeast.
Right.
That was why they had them. So if Miami plays Tampa, I do think they get worse ratings than Texas versus Arizona because Texas is a legit team. Now, you could argue Miami and Tampa is very possible.
Yeah.
And
No, Miami's going to screw it up. They're done.
They made the playoffs. So again, if you had a California series, like, if you had the Angels, Dodgers, that's fine. Right. The Mets, Yankees, everyone loves it. Those kind of things happen. But if you had a Florida series, to me, that is a weight in the ocean of weights. The ratings are going to be very, very bad. Arizona, Texas was not very good, and I still argue that Texas is not a big draw because of what they had to do at the beginning of the season. They were putting Mr. DeGrom out to introduce himself to fans at a grocery store. He was signing items at a grocery store before the start of the season. I even argued that they'd have to bring them out during the Cowboy game, like you do a high school team, and say, hey, Texas, let's congratulate our Major League Baseball team on winning the World Series. And the Cowboy fans are like, you're not the Cowboys. We want a Super Bowl.
I'll go one better. I'll bet you most of the people in the country don't even know where the Texas Rangers play. They know they play in Texas, but name the city.
That is a fair point.
What airport do you have to fly in to go watch Texas Rangers? Do you even know?
In the city of Dallas, Texas Rangers are the third most popular team in their own city. They got the Cowboys and the Mavericks are ahead of them.
Well, yeah. The other issue too, and baseball needs to address this, and I watched this getting into the playoffs. The World Series cannot overlap the hockey season, the basketball season, and the football season. And that's the real problem with baseball right now. You either need to start baseball in mid-March and get it going, and the World Series needs to be the first 2 weeks of October, and then it's done. Because then hockey can pick up mid-October, basketball can pick up mid-October, because I know for me, I got a son that loves hockey. It was either we were watching the World Series or we were watching the Penguins, or, then all of a sudden he wants to watch basketball, and you just sports. And then forget Monday Night Football. You're never winning a ratings war there, right?
Yep.
I mean, especially when you have Arnold Schwarzenegger talking silly to a donkey with Eli and Peyton Manning, which was hilarious, by the way, but you're not getting that.
Nope.
Ended in October.
A simpler solution is go play 150 instead of 162 games.
Yeah, if you
could be done.
Or don't put 52 teams in the playoffs, including the minor leagues.
Yeah, they're never going to do that. Too much money.
So
they're never going to do that.
To solve baseball's problem is they need to stay away from football. I think we all agree. Once you have college football starting and NFL starting, people are turning it off. And the other problem that you have, and this is why we'll call it the Florida earthquake if that were to occur. Right now, with the way it is, once you realize all of your teams are gone, you're moving to football. And Florida is a football basketball kind of place. Miami is owned by the Heat. Miami Dolphins. These are the teams that own that state as well. So these teams aren't even ranking high in their own region. So that's a problem. So I agree with you. I think we can move baseball up. But if you were to ask me of all the two teams, for me, my pick of the two teams would be the Florida matchup. I think the Florida matchup would be the worst ratings. Todd, what matchup are you're thinking that like a Seattle-Arizona matchup would also be a terrible?
Seattle-Arizona, it'd be a disaster. But you brought up a really good point with the SEC. If you get into SEC country, you got problems.
Oh.
You got real problems. So, you got to avoid the SEC. And, man, I'm sorry. Seattle-Arizona, I don't – that's it.
Seattle-Arizona, that's a bad series. Miami and Tampa is a bad series. Dad, what say you?
Well, there are a lot of bad ones, but I'm going to go with the Miami-Tampa because now you got the whole series in a state that doesn't like either team. So you're not even going to get the Florida audience. So it's that one would really be shallow.
If you wanted to have the experience of going to a World Series, those two teams would give you a very fair market value for tickets because they would probably
you could sit right behind the home plate umpire every night.
That everyone's like, oh, this is we gotta spruce this up, and then again battle with other sports. Well, that was the World Series take on what could be worse than the Arizona-Texas Rangers. If you didn't watch it, it was exciting for Texas. They did win, and Arizona ran out of steam, if you will. I think that also hurt the ratings, is that the Diamondbacks didn't have any star power. And a lot of times I listen to the announcers, they're like, you don't know this team, but they're fun to watch. That doesn't help.
Even Texas, Corey Seager's the biggest name. He's a great player. Ask 100 people on the street who Corey Seager is, and 4 might know. Mm-hmm. So it's
that'll change now.
Once he took off the Dodger uniform, that did affect him. that did it.
Negatively, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. It wasn't super positive. Yeah. So those are the World Series matchups that you cannot wait to not watch. Luckily for you, baseball will continue to be oblivious to the fact that they have other sports they're competing with, and they think they're the best thing in town. Things that you don't have to worry about if you're the NFL and you're like, let's put the Super Bowl wherever we want because we own the market. Baseball needs to actually think about these things, in my opinion. But what do we know?
Didn't they just play a football game in like Germany or something?
Yes.
Every week they have a game in Europe.
Oh, yeah, and people still watch that thing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. People get up and watch it. Absolutely.
Oh, it's so horrible.
Football owns it. And here we are at SwingBadder, and that is our episode of What's Worse Than a Diamondback Texas Ranger World Series.
You're nice.
I got Todd as Seattle and Arizona as a really bad one. I think that's actually a good pick. Even Colorado, Seattle would be bad just because everything's on the West Coast. And once you put things on the West Coast that's not in California, that's a horrible marketplace. I also agree the Florida matchup would be terrible. Terrible, terrible. That's all I have for our opinions. I am your host, Brendan, and thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to like and subscribe to SwingBadder as we continue to give you our wonderful takes.
Batter on.